everybody. It is Romania Black, and we're on episode 9 of ORB on the movements of the earth. And last episode, Yolenta has decided to join Badini and Akshay in their quest to learn more about heliocentrism. And Badini ain't messing around. Badini also is kind of terrifying because he's just like, well, you'll either help us and it's no skin off our back, because if we don't like it, we'll just turn you in. And I'm like, oh my gosh, Badini, don't. I love Badini as a character, but you're like, but sir, be nice. And he's like, no. So what can we do? But I'm not going to waste any more time because we have a lot of comments to get through in dealing with episodes 4, 5, and 6 with this series. But before that, while I was editing episode 8, I was also on the Discord, and patron M shared this fan art cosplay of somebody dressing as Badini from episode 6. And I was like, oh, cool. And they had a candle sitting on their eye and the wax melting and blinding them. And then it hit me. I was like, why did I not bring that up when we were talking about Icarus? Because back in episode 6, it's like, yes, it's like the wax blinding him, human ambition being like the wax wings, him reading the book in episode 6, knowing that he was flying too close to the sun. This series, I was like, the connection, So I should have talked about it last episode, but I'm so glad that M brought that cosplay up because that reminded me of just the way this symbolism is connecting back and tying to things. Chef's kiss. Absolutely love it. Speaking of extra things, the mods approved this. But I Swallow Apple Seeds for episode 4 said you compared Akshay to a bear in the reaction, and it should please you to know that a lot of ORB fan artists portray Akshay as a bear in fan art. And I was like, yes. Also, Akshay's breakdown about heaven is more unhinged in the manga. The entire rant takes up an entire page, and I guess due to time constraints, they had to shorten it. But here is the entire thing. And the mods were like, you probably need to check it out because it's kind of crazy. So this is all in one page of the manga, but in episode 4, when Akshay does his kind of rant to Gross, here's the entire thing. It's likely for one to be betrayed by their expectations. That's the principle I've been living with. Any pain from this reality would be lessened if I acknowledged that fact from the start. Or maybe it's that life itself was never fun for me. The only time that someone can feel fortunate in this world is the moment that they're born, and that with that qualification, anybody else who weren't chosen to be born in privilege yearn for it in their desires. Yet all that remains is fruitless endeavors. The only thing for us fortunate fellows that we can do is get tired by desperately clinging to life, regardless whether or not we try our best or are told to do so by others. To add more salt to the wound, it seems that we must all carry the sins of our forefathers as we were born. So this obviously spells out that we carry more suffering in our lives than any amount possible happiness that can balance out our torment. I know that I'm not able to continue on with my life with this current outlook that I have on this earth. That's why heaven is my only salvation. My future salvation and fulfillment would all be sated once I move on from this world and onto what awaits me in heaven. It's meaningless for me to even consider having a better life in this world. I should give up on life. The only thing that I can do in this world is one thing, and that's to pray. If I can do that, a worthless person like me would be worthy enough for heaven to take me in. Heaven, you're the best. Heaven, you're the most majestic. Heaven, liberate my soul. I want to go to heaven. I need to go to heaven. Heaven must, I must unite. As I Swallow Apple Seed says, Akshay was going through it here. Man, damn. And it's just like, I don't know. It's this idea that you're not good enough, and that unless you pray, unless you believe in this higher power, you don't have any hope for the future. And it's just so dour. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's crazy. It's crazy, right? It's crazy. But I thank you for showing the whole conversation, because that is wild. And I feel for Akshay, and I'm glad that he's with Badini, who can kind of calm him down a little bit while also having a background as a deacon to kind of. Akshay is religious and Badini is as well, but Badini comes at it from a totally different perspective. So he's able to kind of meet Akshay's. I feel like Gross was not very religious. He had kind of became agnostic by the end of his life. And so it's interesting to have Badini there to kind of back Akshay's beliefs up, but do so in a much more healthy manner than maybe he was used to before. So that's crazy. Nicola Kulik 3810 for episode 5 says the necklace was probably in the stone casket, along with the letter that Raphael had left behind. Because although we did not officially see Raphael leave the necklace there, the most logical thing is that he did leave it there. The last time that we saw Raphael with the necklace was when he was writing the letter. There we go. And when Raphael returned home and the professor asked if he'd planned to continue his research, he no longer had the necklace with him, which gives us the suggestion he left it together with the stone letter in the stone casket. And then the one heretic just plucked it out because it was something easy to take with him, and leaving the other stuff there. That makes the most sense, so I'm glad you helped clear that up. We've solved one clue. We've solved one problem, so hooray. Geen had a big comment for episode 5 and episode 6, so we're going to read both those together. Geen says for episode 5, I really love how Gross, at the end, found his peace through continuing the legacy of truth-seeking. In a way, the idea of truth and heliocentrism gave him a lot of what faith in God gives most people. The feeling of belonging to something greater than yourself, the kinship of knowing there are other people who believe, and the travel the same path that you do, and the steadiness of knowing the path ahead of you, no matter how treacherous it is, and the belief you can see the horizon at the end of it all, even when you won't be there to see it bloom. Humans crave companionship and the feeling of being understood, after all, which makes finding people who believe in the same things that you do as being freeing. And there's certainly in believing something, and there is certainty in believing in something completely. It gives people a will to push on, no matter what happens. It's why it's so crushing when that belief is lost, because with it, down also goes the certainty of your own path and choices. So this is actually interesting to bring this up, and I will get to the other part of episode 5 comment in episode 6, but it was actually funny. I was in a store today, just like a little store, and I was looking around. I was waiting on an appointment, and so I was looking at this little store because I had nothing else to do. And there was a woman in there that was off to the side, just kind of hanging out, sewing on something. It was like a craft shop. And this woman comes in and starts talking to her, and she was basically saying like, hey, I know that you quit our church like some months ago, and I just want to let you know we got a new pastor, and he's really nice, and I think you'd like him, and I'd really like you to come back to church and come hang out because I've missed seeing you there. And it was kind of like, it was an awkward conversation because the woman was like, what I gleaned from the conversation was that the woman, left the church because some people at the church had been talking behind her back, is what I got from the conversation. And I was like, ugh. But then this one woman was like, well, I really wish you'd come back because, I've missed seeing you there. We've got this new pastor, and, some of those other women, don't let them do that to you. It's okay. And I kind of had two thoughts. One was kind of what Geen's comment is talking about, in that, people crave that connection and that companionship and fellowship and having that faith together and all that. And it's nice this woman came in to reach out to this other woman being like, hey, we want you there, and we want you to have this place of belonging and community. And that was really nice. I thought that was a really nice gesture on her behalf to like come and invite the woman back and say, hey, it's okay. You still have a place to belong here and stuff. And I really liked that. But there was this creeping sense in the back of my mind that was like, if you really also care about this woman, you could also visit her outside of church and see her there and give her that companionship and fellowship and talk to her that way too. Does she, and I know that's hard because for a lot of people, you don't see people except when you're at gatherings like church because our lives are so busy. We have jobs and everything else. That was nagging at the back of my mind. And that's such a, it's not my place to say that because these women may not be able to see each other except when they're at church. Maybe that's the only time they carve out to do that. But it was kind of a heartbreaking conversation. Also, the fact I don't really go to a church. I'm Christian, but I kind of just practice on my own because, one, time to do it with the channel and life and everything else, but also because like the reason this woman left the church was because people were kind of talking behind her back, and who wants to deal with that? So yeah, it was interesting. But anyway, so they also said, the way you said what when you heard out Aksha's voice was said is hilarious. And yes, Polish words have a lot of hissing sounds. So many people who don't know my language describe two Poles talking as two snakes hissing at each other. I kind of want to hear it. I want to hear this. My school used to celebrate Pulaski Day when I was younger. And if you don't know what Pulaski Day is, It's a celebration that is Kashmir Pulaski Day, and it's been observed in my state. It's a local holiday for an American Revolutionary War cavalry officer who was born in Poland as Kazimierz Pulaski. He's praised for his contributions to the U.S. military and the American Revolution, known as the father of the American cavalry. We used to practice that all in school growing up. Like, we would get a day out of school in February that was called Pulaski, or we called it Pulaski Day, and we always got out of school. Maybe it wasn't in February, but yeah, we always got out of school on that day. It was crazy. And I was thinking to myself growing up, I was like, why are we celebrating this? but I guess, I don't know. I know around Chicago and stuff, there's a bigger Polish population of people from Poland that immigrated there. But I was just like, we were on the opposite end of the state, and I never really understood that. So interesting. But yeah, I kind of want to hear people talking Polish to one another. I might have to look that up. And then Geen said for episode 6, I really love how deeply religious, I like this comment a lot, how deeply religious Bodini is while still questioning everything around him. He sees the inconsistencies in how people see the world around him, and he's like, no, for sure, it's not God's mistake. It's just that human perception of the world that's lacking, not the God's design of it. I really appreciate the way that they've written it, not making Bodini abandon his faith, just disagree with how others perceive it. In most cases in anime, I think it would go the route of disillusionment and atheism. But here, it's very clear that Bodini believes in God very deeply and has faith in his design. It's really nice to see. I do appreciate Bodini and relate to him a lot, where it's like you can have faith, you just kind of disagree with the system that people are going with as a whole. I can relate to Bodini. I get it. I love Bodini's curiosity so much. The fact he is willing to hurt himself and literally get blinded just for a scrap of knowledge is impressive and scary at the same time. There's just something about this huge thirst to know that is very compelling to see. After all, without curiosity, we would still be sitting in caves hitting rocks together. Because what is curiosity if not the constant push to invent and observe new things and work out solutions to problems that seem impossible? Spoken like a true academic, spoken like a true intellectual. I love that. I do love Bodini so much. He terrifies me because he doesn't seem to have a problem with throwing other people under the bus, but what can we do? Moomin, for episode 6, says, I absolutely love Bodini. Oh, he is full of himself for sure. But punishing himself for knowledge? What a guy. For as long as punishment earns me the freedom to study. I just want to say that this level of intellectual curiosity is rare. Yeah, I don't know if I would go as far as Bodini does to hurt himself for knowledge, but I respect it. I respect it hardcore. Jav Gamer for episode 6 says, I love the animation of how Bodini jumps in through the window to get the forbidden book. Instead of carefully maneuvering inside one leg at a time or jumping through or something, he straight up dives in head first with zero regard for anything else. Not only does it look kind of funny, it's a small bit of characterization for him. He couldn't care less about looking cool or being careful about going through the window. What he cared about was getting that book now. So he takes the fastest and most direct route, regardless of the potential consequence. And that's all fine and dandy. I am a little bit worried about him acting fast through the most direct route without potential consequence worry. Because back then, it was just himself that could suffer. He would be the one that would get hurt. And he's like, whatever, I don't care. Here, now, Aksha and Yolenta are now involved. And it's like, but they could get hurt. And I don't think Bodini cares. And I was like, that makes me a little nervous. For them, I don't think Bodini cares. And I'm a little bit worried about that. So we'll see. But then Anthony, finally, I know I've taken forever on this intro. Anthony on the Discord for episode 6 says, I feel this is incredibly relevant as one way to look at not just the latter, but much of scholar history. And so Anthony shared this page called The God of the Gaps. And it says, the God of the Gaps is a theological concept that emerged in the 19th century and revolves around the idea that gaps in scientific understanding are regarded as indications of the existence of God. This perspective has its origins in observation that some individuals, often with religious inclinations, point to areas where science falls short in explaining natural phenomena as opportunities to insert the presence of a divine creator. The term itself was coined in response to this tendency. This theological view suggests that God fills in the gaps left by scientific knowledge, and that these gaps represent moments of divine intervention or influence. This concept has been met with criticism and debate from various quarters. Detractors argue that this perspective is problematic as it seems to rely on gaps in human understanding and ignorance to make its case for the existence of God. As scientific knowledge continues to advance, these gaps tend to shrink, potentially weakening the argument for God's existence. Critics contend that such an approach can undermine religious beliefs by suggesting God only operates in the unexplained areas of our understanding, leaving little room for divine involvement in a comprehensive and coherent worldview. The God of the Gaps perspective has been criticized for its association with logical fallacies. The God of the Gaps perspective is also a form of confirmation bias, since it involves interpreting ambiguous evidence, or rather no evidence, as supporting one's existing values. This type of reasoning is seen as inherently flawed and does not provide a robust foundation for religious faith. In this context, some theologians and scientists have proposed that a more satisfactory approach is to view evidence of God's actions within the natural processes themselves, rather than relying on the gaps in scientific understanding to validate religious beliefs. So I would honestly, there's a lot of different term usement and criticism stuff that's in, the wiki about it. But I was about to say, I personally am like kind of in the mindset of, you could also look at the wonders of the human body, the brain, the wonders of many things. If you wanted to point to that to creationism, you could, in just that, isn't this amazing how this works? There's so many processes within science that you're sitting there going, how does that even happen? And there's like, how does that even start? And so you could say that there's a higher power involvement. I also, like we talked about in previous episodes, that the world is beautiful because of a divine presence. And we just need to recognize that, kind of like what Hubert was wanting. But yeah, I'm getting hot and sweaty in this jacket. I thought that I would be able to wear it, but then I was like, nope, actually, I'm getting all fired up about episode 9. So we're just going to do that. But thank you very much, Anthony, for providing that. I really enjoy it. And thank you all so much for the comments. Seriously, this has been so much fun. And it's made me excited each week to watch ORB and then read the comments and see what y'all think about the episodes. So with that entirely way too long intro out of the way, I am super excited to see what we're going to get. So we're going to start ORB on the Movements of the Earth, episode 9. And we're going to do that here. Oh, and if I could get started first. And we are going to do that here in 3, 2, 1. All right, I'm just putting Whiteboard Coon here to be safe. Oh, the series is so good. Oh, I feel inspired every time I watch an episode of this series. Every time I watch an episode of this series, I feel inspired. I feel like it is a religious experience just watching the series. It's so good. Oh, it's so good. So this episode was called "This Is What It Means to Learn Something," I think. I was like, Budini, bitch, you know. So yeah, so this episode, like sudden backstory of the episode. If you know the anime trend of as soon as we get sudden backstory on a character, it means they're probably going to die. But you know what? We've got lots of sudden backstory on lots of characters, so who's to say? But what a great episode. Oh, my heart. In love with it. So this focuses a lot about Count Piast and kind of the interesting thing about it, and about him inheriting the work of the one professor. I guess if we're going to talk about things with this episode that there are to talk about, it's this idea of inherited knowledge, and also of the idea of updating knowledge. I think back to, there was a patron on this channel, Moomin, who talked about science is not here to prove right. It's here to prove wrong. And it's this idea of everything evolving, and that we always, I think that's kind of one of the big things without getting into, like creationism versus evolution, is creationism is it's very static. It's very set. right? It doesn't change. It's like, here's the Bible. We've had it for 2,000 years. We've been going over the same principles. We've been the same text for 2,000 years. We're not altering it. We're not changing it, which doesn't account for translation and adaptation and all of that good stuff. But they're like, it's this document it's timeless and has been for 2,000 years. It's been the same document, which I know you could argue it changes because of translation and all those other things. There's that. And then there's the idea of the values within that document being static, and that here's what a family is, here's what marriage is constituted as, whatever. And then you have evolution, which is constantly changing, which constantly adapts, which changes and adapts and flows to the bend of the world around it, and is kind of an antithesis to that prior notion altogether. And I feel, growing up, there was a lot of anti-evolution sentiments, especially in the 90s. I feel like there was a lot of pushback against evolution and stuff, and creationism was really pushed where I was at in the rural Midwest of America. And so, because I feel like, when you acknowledge how everything else in the world adapts and changes over time, then it kind of does make a stagnant practice seem outdated and seem like, is it totally correct? And I maintain my faith with the knowledge that that document contains ideas that are overarching of my faith. But also you have to recognize that it is a document written by dudes 2,000 years ago that are just it's like they're playing a game of telephone of what they experienced and heard in the moment and heard from others and writing it down. And who's to say there's not flaws in memory? One of my favorite classes I took in grad school was a class on authorship, where we read accounts from people who had experienced the same things, but the way they wrote about them and the way that they described them were very different. And so you can't just, humans are flawed. And that's kind of a big message in this episode, is that humans are flawed and we are not perfect. So to take the knowledge that we've wrote down and the things we've wrote down and treat them as such is not correct. And so I just love this episode about it. But you have this idea of the one mentor passing down his library to Piast because he thinks Piast is ready to handle it. And man, one thing I really liked about this anime is that they showed a passage of time really well. Like the one man, the mentor that Piast interacts with, like the 20 years, you saw that change in 20 years. You're like, oh wow, some time has passed. Although Piast must have been one of those guys that aged very quickly, very rapidly, because he seemed like he looked the same over 25 years than he did at the end of last episode. And then now we have him and he has aged, which, you know what? It's funny how that works. I had two coaches when I was on a competitive team in college, and they were literally within 5 years of each other. I thought one was 50 and one was 30. They were the exact same age. They were both 35. And I was like, oh, but the one coach, he had immediately aged rapidly in his 30s and looked like he was 50. And now he is 50 and he looks exactly the same. So he just aged very quickly and then just stopped aging. And it's okay. But yeah. So, man, the last 5 years, I'm going to imagine that one count got really sick the last 5 years. And that's why he aged so much. But man, Piast kept his looks going for a long time. Let me tell you all, the moment they laid that candle down next to all these boxes with all these papers, I was like, this whole place is going to go up in flame. I am worried that I know they laid it on the table, but I was still like, oh, that's a lot of flammable paper that's in that room next to that candlelight. I am worried that the moment we saw this vault with all of the documents, I'm like, is it all going to burn down? Because in the OP, there's raffle and things burning. I don't know. I just feel like something's going to burn, or all these records are going to burn, or something's going to happen. I got this, this episode was overarchingly really positive and heartfelt, and I wanted to cry 3 times throughout it. It didn't bring on the tears, but I was really close, especially with Yolenta's speech at the end. But I was also this whole time going, oh my God, please don't light on fire. I don't want them to lose all this documentation that's 2,000 years of records. But there was something in this that I was like, they're all missing. the model of the universe that was revised and defined, which is very symmetrical. Death the Kid would be approving of this epicycle, of the double epicycle. I wanted to look it up. So what was double epicycle? I wanted to see like what exactly this was. Deferent and epicycles. It says in Hipparchian, Ptolemaic, and Copernican systems of astronomy, the epicycle from ancient Greek, epikoulos, upon the circle, meaning circle moving on another circle, was a geometric model used to explain the variations in speed and direction of the apparent motion of sun, moon, and planets. It explained the retrograde motion of the 5 planets known at the time. Secondarily, it explained the changes in apparent distances of the planets from the Earth. Okay. It was first proposed by Apollonius of Perga at the end of the 3rd century BC, developed by Apollonius of Perga and Hipparchus of Rhodes, who used it extensively during the 2nd century BC, and then formalized and extensively used by Ptolemy in his 2nd century AD astronomical treatise, the Amalgast. Yeah, so but again, it led to creations of the geocentric model, which leads to heliocentric, which leads to, it's one of those things where one thing leads to another, and humans are proud. Humans are proud creatures that want the credit for themselves. The moment Bodini was like, I'm going to be the last person to mess with heliocentrism, I was like, no, you're not. I was like, no, you're not. But we're going to talk about this. But just the idea of knowledge compounds on itself. The more you break apart something, the more you're going to discover about it. And the human brain is not capable of finding out every single little thing about something. Someone else, the reason why in an English class your teacher wants your friend to proofread your paper is because your brain is going to miss some things. And you need a second set of eyes to look over it and figure out, what did you miss? What did you see? Because our brains, humans like to think they're correct. We like to think we're correct. That's how we're hardwired. We're a bit proud creatures. We like to believe we're right, even when we're wrong. And our brains like to convince us that we're right. So when you proofread a paper, and even I do it, I may look at it and go, yeah, that looks fine. And then another pair of eyes looks at it and it's like, why'd you do that? And you're like, oh, well, I didn't even think about that. So knowledge compounds upon itself. And it's so frustrating in this episode because these men are so proud of the work that they've done, as they should be, that they think that if someone proves what they've been doing wrong, it will make their work meaningless. But as Hubert told us in episode 2, that just because an answer is wrong does not mean that it's meaningless. And you learn something from it, and you gain knowledge from it, and you get better from it. So in all of human history, this was the line I wanted to talk about. It's like a minute into this. No one but me has achieved this level of precision. We are proud creatures, are we not? There was something that kind of was nagging me throughout this, and it's been nagging me since Bodini was like, I'll be the last person to do heliocentrism, because we've talked about this early on with Raffles episodes, that humans, we are all unique. Yes, everyone is born completely unique of another because of our genetic makeup, right? No two people are exactly the same, unless you clone someone, which 10 years from now, who knows? But humans are unique. However, as a species, our functionality, we all have a brain, we all have spines, we all have whatever. Now, granted, there are humans that are born without certain parts, organs, whatever, but as a species, as a whole, typically, we are all born with these same functional parts. And part of that is that we are all born with a set intelligence. Now, it can vary from person to person. Sure, it can increase, decrease, whatever, through a number of factors. But it always bugs me when I didn't even realize this until, I was older, but the stories we hear are from a certain perspective. This is all taking place in Europe, right? And we're seeing from the European perspective. So sure, this count may be the only one who's achieved this level of precision in his community, in Europe, in this same language speaking group. But who is to say that thousands and thousands of miles away in Asia or in some form of native indigenous North America, there is not someone who has also come to similar conclusions just with a different modality of communication or a different way of expressing it, you know? So I always feel like it's filled with hubris to say that no one has achieved something but me with this level of precision. It's full of a lot of hubris to say that, and people with hubris are typically proven wrong. But if you carry that idea that you are the only one that has done this level of research and you've reached this point, then and you're like, I've sacrificed all the other possibilities, options, and opportunities and devoted my entire life to refining this model. If you believe that your life's worth is designated to this research, then it being proven wrong would shatter you completely. Understandably so. But I hate that they think in that rationality, because what they should be doing instead is saying, oh, I'm laying the precedent. I'm carrying the torch. I'm the next step on the ladder. I'm the next step on the stairs towards truth. And you sometimes can't jump from point A. Listen to me. I did not like geometry in high school. I hated geometry. The thing I hated most about geometry were proofs. Geometric proofs. You know why? Because even if I figured out the answer, you had to have steps to get there, and your steps had to go in order. And I was like, but I got the answer here. And they're like, but what were the steps to get there? And I'm like, well, why do I have to have 5 steps? And they're like, because that's just how it works. And I always got frustrated with proofs, but this is kind of what that is in form of the universe, where you have you can't just have a perfected model of the universe automatically. There are steps to get there. There are steps to create it. And you are going to have to prove other forms wrong to get the right version. So I feel like that's not a waste. And it kind of ties back to science, where people are like, oh, well, this, like, for example, in modern medicine, when you find out that this drug that you've been using causes like a certain side effect, and people are like, well, it's had this side effect all along. It was terrible from the get-go. Why do we do this? And it's like, well, probably because it benefited people along the way, but you've got to keep researching to figure out those things. And until you keep researching and digging deeper, do you find all these things that there's no way you could have known before unless you do all these trials and you do all this research, and your government funds those research projects. But anyway, so you have to have those in place to make scientific advancements. And you aren't going to find a perfect answer immediately. I get so frustrated with modern voices out there that are like, I found the answer. I've found the cause of this problem. But it's not backed by any research or any foundation. It's just like, we found this one study that proved it. And it's like, that's not enough. And we live in such a society of immediate instant gratification desire that we don't want to put the time and effort into making those discoveries. We just want an answer now. We're like, well, we can get on the internet and get things in 2.0 seconds. Why can't we get an answer to this now? And it's like, because you have to research, you have to test. It takes time. And we are not a species that time is like a drug. Once we're given something that gives us an immediacy, we're like addicted to it. And we want that immediacy with everything. And that's not possible. And we'll talk more about that with Yolenta and the rating thing. But this episode is just I want to praise this series so much because it gets kind of the heart to so much modern things that we're dealing with, but framing it with this prior experience with these counts, researching and taking data from 2,000 years ago and applying it to now. It's crazy. It's crazy. So he's like, I was certain that God would choose only one person. That's also the hubris of humanity. That is the hubris of humanity, being like, I was certain that God would choose one person to reach the truth. And I swore I wouldn't tell anyone until it was completed. So just like Badini's like, I'm going to be the one to solve everything. This count was like, I was going to be the one to perfect it. I thought God had chose me. And it's like, God could have chosen you, but you're not going to be the only one. Look, God had one kid, but you ain't him. And humanity is a collective. So you are going to have to work with others, whether you like it or not, to get to the bottom of things. And it's the hubris of Bodini in this count to think they're going to be the only ones to finish it and perfect it. But then he says that one person is probably not me, but you. When you do research as long as I have, you realize that. He's like, but the thing is, what he wants Piast to do is take all the research from before him along with his and perfect it and finish his work for him. And Piast has this moment of resistance and doubt when he looks up. And now you can see it. When you look out, you can see the perfect Venus there. Venus is the one star I love finding because it's easy to find when it's full. You're like, oh, there it is. It's really bright. And so you can see it like in the corner there. And Piast has this moment of seeing it full and realizes that, oh, yeah, his work was wrong. Can I inherit such a task? He's like, I have to be audacious. I will perfect the professors. And then he sees it. And he's like, oh. But you weren't exhausted. He's like, it wasn't the final phase. That's what he was talking about. Yeah. So, I mean, I understand why he'd be nervous because he's like, I don't want to finish this guy's work because what if I prove it wrong? And then all his life's work's a mess. And you could tell he was really upset by that when he died. Because 5 years later, after he turns him down, he's like, yeah, why did you turn me down? Were you afraid you were going to prove me wrong? Did you doubt my theory? And he's like, no, your theory is amazing. It's such an accurate model. It's in accordance to the Holy Scripture and Aristotle. I've never once doubted it. But again, it's so funny. It's so funny to me. And that's kind of one of my things that I have to get at with people. I feel like sometimes humanity, we want to position ourselves on the same level as God. And I know that sounds weird, but a lot of times we do, where we're like, well, I have this judgment of this person, or I have this judgment of their actions. And it's like, you're not God, so no, you really shouldn't. And it's like, oh, well, but I think I'm important, and I think I'm chosen to do this, and I'm thinking this. Like, you're giving yourself a lot of power in that moment, instead of just being like a messenger or a researcher or an extension or someone that's serving God. Instead, you want to be on that same level when you kind of take on that onus. And it's like, that's maybe not the point, but what do I know? I'm just a lady. He's like, it's never complete. And that's the thing about it. That's the thing about the world. It will never be complete. There will always be, you see news stories all the time of them discovering new species. We're in 2025. We're in 2025. We have all the modern technology to find new species at our fingertips, and we're still discovering new things. And we've scoured nearly every extent of the surface of the earth. The ocean is the scariest place on this planet because we have not dove to the depths of it, and we don't know what's down there. It is terrifying. The ocean is terrifying. I watched all those documentaries of when the Titanic sunk and James Cameron and his crew went down to the Titanic location, and there were just these bugs, water bugs, and fish on the bottom of the ocean that I was like, what is that? And why is it there? Anglerfish terrify me. There's been a couple that have washed on the shore in the last years because of global warming, and they are terrifying. And I'm like, oh, if that's at the bottom of the ocean, I want to know. But we don't know everything. And we will never know anything because evolution continues. It constantly evolves. Stars will eventually implode, and stars will die, and new stars will emerge, and you will never be able to keep track of all of it. Just like you can never read all the books in the world. You can never watch all of the movies in the world. It's impossible. You don't have enough time. And that's kind of, your brain can't wrap around it, and that's what makes it so crazy, is that you can't complete everything. We'll never, in our lifetimes, we will never know everything about the world. And that can be very frustrating. But I feel like the better way to look at it, rather than these guys that are like, I don't want my lifetime of work to be meaningless, because that's what terrifies him the most and what terrifies Piast as well, to make them think that they've wasted their lives. It's like, no, they've contributed so much to the world, and they've contributed so much to science and to the story, and they've passed the torch on. They've done what they could, and their work is not, it's only meaningless if you do nothing. They've done so much. So it's like, you've passed the knowledge on. You should be proud of that. But humans don't like being wrong. Humans don't like being wrong. And then Piast says, well, you just couldn't complete the model because you lacked the ability to do so. But that doesn't mean your research was wrong. You dedicating your life was not a mistake. I love that. I love this scene where he grabs his hand. He's like, one day, tell me when we meet in heaven the truth. I love that scene. That's so beautiful. And then the idea of the truth with, you know, him at the end, Piast, where he learns it himself. I like how he left the one guy with the hat. He's like, yeah, the professor's gone, take care of the body. And he's like, oh. I know. He was like, I gotta get to work, but I felt bad for that one guy. He's like, oh, thanks. Thanks for leaving me the corpse to dispose of. Cool. He was the Aksha of his generation. That's what he was. So then we get the intro. And then we have the episode itself. He's like, you imbeciles and your ridiculous theory. Fine. I can't see for myself, so I want Aksha to use his eyes to help. But and he's like, really? Was it that easy? I like Yolinda's like, yay! And Aksha's like, I have no clue what's going on. He's like, but my condition is that you must prove what I know to be false. And so basically what he was saying is you have to prove that I know back then that Venus was full, but I want you to prove me wrong so that if I'm proven wrong, that means the count that I took over his work to try to perfect his model is still correct. And Bodini's like, no. He's like, no, I don't think we're going to do that. But sure, whatever, old man. Yeah. He's like, such an error no longer concerns me now. But it's true, this one-time mistake sighting planted seeds of doubt. I saw Venus in its final phrase. I like that Yolenta and Bodini are like the hot, juicy gossip. The tea is piping hot, and Aksha's like, cool, what? Bless his heart. Aksha's like, I don't know what's going on. He's like, what does that mean? And they basically explain, if you see it in its final phase, that means... Now, he does bring up a good point. He's like, it could mean the Earth's moving. It could also mean that Venus is moving, but the Earth is not. Although it would seem rather silly for God to make a one planet randomly move and Earth to be stationary, but, you know, stranger things have happened, right? So he's like, we're going to settle this matter once and for all. I honestly loved the method he used to see if Aksha could see the pattern. Because when he said it has to be a circle or a square, I was like, well, if it was a circle or a square and Aksha was not a patron saint of innocence, then he could have just lied and said, oh, it's a square or it's a circle. And he had a 50% chance of being right. But Piast was clever and he made it not a circle or a square, but instead like a backwards D, like a half moon. And honestly, Yolenta's like, I can't even see that. I think it's awesome. His eyesight must be insane because I wouldn't know. I've wore glasses or contacts since the 3rd grade. So my eyesight is not good. And then I like these, like, I'm going back to my room. He's like, as soon as he realizes the Aksha, he's like, you'll do. I gotta go take a nap and prepare for all this. He's old. Leave him alone. I love it. So yeah, Aksha and Yolenta have this talk. And he's like, if I do see Venus in its final phrase, if I don't see it, it's going to mean that Earth has been at the bottom of everything, right? This whole time. And Yolenta's like, you know, do you think the world is full of suffering? And she's like, I know how you feel. I was kind of brought up that way too. We've been taught it's just our duty to ascend this realm and leave this corporate world behind and go to heaven. But she's like, it's always bothered me. This world holds too much beauty for such a lowly place. Oh, her and Hubert would get along so well. They would have gotten along so well. And she's like, it could be that the Earth moves. Or not. And then Bodini's like, I hate to break up your reflection, but it's only going to be visible for 3 hours, so we got to go. And he's like, will Count Piast refuse to believe it even if we say it's full? And he's like, yeah, he could, but even if that happens... He's like, at least I'll know I'm right. I like the fun. And he's like, whatever. If he denies it, I'll know that we're good. He's like, are you worried? And he's like, no. He's like, what we're about to see will shape the universe. He's like, I don't really understand what's going on, but I want Venus to be full. I love the idea that Aksha, he wants to be proven wrong. He wants to believe there's hope. He wants to believe the world's beautiful. He wants to know that this worldview he's been brainwashed into thinking is not correct. And the possibility of it happening is exciting to him. I love it whenever the mangaka has Aksha being serious with this moment of reflection. He looks so good. He looks so freaking good. The thumbnail's probably going to be the moment he sees Venus, because that was such an amazing moment. I also love the idea and the concept that Aksha has gone from not being able to look up in the sky because he believes that the heavens are judging him from above, to finding the next model of heliocentrism, to proving its existence. I love just the beam of light that shatters the glass, like the stained glass is shattered and there's the earth. I love that moment. It's so beautiful. It looks biblical. It looks like a divine light cast upon Aksha, and in that moment he's like, it's full. We proved it. There it is. And of course, the Count isn't immediately going to say he believes it, but it's like, come on. You know that it's impacted him. And Badini's like, yes. It's the same sky I've always seen, but it looks so different now. And I love that concept that Badini says this is what it means to learn something, I think. Because knowledge is a miracle. Knowledge is, honestly, as a teacher and as a human being, it bugs me so much when people just want to be mindless about things. I mean, I get that you need escapism. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But I don't know. I was talking to one of my students who's 18, and we were talking about brain rot. And I'm in my mid-30s, but they want to do a speech about brain rot. And I was like, what is brain rot? And they were explaining it. And they were explaining like brain rot culture amongst Gen Alpha. And I felt like my heart sag a little bit. I was like, because, you know, like meme culture, memes have meanings. They are derived in reference to something. It's a meme because it references something before. And you have to have some type of critical thinking, even if it's bare minimum, to figure out what exactly the reference is. And if you don't know what the reference is, then you're usually like, well, what's the reference? And there's a curiosity there. You want to find out what it means. The only curiosity with brain rot is someone might going, what the hell is a ballerina teacup? Or I was like, what? Or something like Italian brain rot where it's just AI schlop, but it doesn't have a meaning. That's the thing. And I tried to think of a positive spin on it where, well, maybe it becomes its own form of modality. Maybe it becomes its own form of communication, and the generation gives it meaning, and it gets to be this interpersonal set of communication. And I'm giving it way more credit than it's due, but I was trying to like put that spin on it. But then it's like, no, brain rot does exactly that. It involves no critical thinking, no thinking at all, and there is no knowledge gained from it. And that is the most like audacious thing I think that's around right now, because it's like, why wouldn't you want to learn something? And I know that the cynical Gen Alpha kid would be like, well, the world sucks. Why would I want to learn anything? But I'm like, this show is something you should be watching then, because it's directly saying like, no, the world does not suck. There are people in it that suck. There are ideas that suck within it, but the world itself does not suck. The world is beautiful, but there are powers that would like to convince you that it sucks. Because then, like they do in this series, they're able to control you and they're able to manipulate you. And that sucks. And that's not good. And this show shows that it happened hundreds of years ago, and the cycle always repeats. But the only thing that's hopeful is that there are always people, whether it's Hubert, whether it's Raffle, whether it's Badini, whether it's Yolenta, whether it's Aksha, there are always people that are willing and brave enough to go against that system and break free from it and inspire others to do the same, like with Gross as well. So that's inspiring and that's hopeful. It's just, and it was hopeful to talk to that 18-year-old because she was very much like, I don't like this. She's like, I know the references and I know what brain rot is, but she's like, but I don't ascribe to it. And I was like, it's always refreshing. Like I get a little bit upset at people that are millennials or Gen X that are like Gen Z and Gen Alpha. They're all just going to be dumb and how are they going to take care of us? And I'm like, yeah, there are problems. There's going to be a lot of problems unless we fix them or we do some course correcting. But there are always going to be people that are going to break free from that system who are intelligent and will be like the Baudinis, will be like the Raffles, and they will break free from it and they will inspire others to do likewise. And humanity will rise out of it. It will suck and it'll probably set us back, who knows what. But I like to view like this show gives me this show gives me an injection of optimism, because if people like this existed in a world where they were subjugated like that, we got a shot. Hopefully, if people don't screw it up intentionally, we got a shot. I like to believe that anyway. But yeah, so they're like, so Count Piast. Now here's the thing. Baudini needs to not talk to anybody in a place of authority. You know, I've realized this. Baudini has no bedside manner. Baudini is selfish. Baudini wants all of the knowledge and stuff for himself, which kudos to him. Good for him. But then he's like, so Count Piast, about that vault and all of your stuff. Baudini is not empathetic at all, nor does he sympathize with people. He's just like, okay, cool. So next thing. And, you know, Yolenta and Akshi are kind of like, hey, he's having a moment, Baudini. So Baudini has no bedside manner whatsoever. And I feel like it's eventually going to catch up to him. It just hasn't yet. And he's like, it can't be. You're all lying. And Aksha's like, nope, I'm a patron saint. I'm going to tell you that's not the case. Even if Venus appears full, it's only proof that Venus revolves around the sun, not the earth itself. And Baudini's like, yeah, you could think of it that way. But I loved this line. But is the universe born from such thinking, the natural products of God or the product of human stubbornness? I loved that line because he's basically saying, he's like, so are you saying that you're right and God's not? Because this is the way that God's making the world. Like, are you going to... I love Baudini that he has so much faith, but he's trying to prove everybody else is just interpreting it wrong. Inspiring. I love it. He's like, are you saying you're a god and that you're right and the way of the universe is wrong? How does it look to you? Love it. He's like, you could never understand my history, the history of humankind, and years of accumulated learning should never be denied so easily. And then Baudini says, then what if there was something powerful enough to instantly deny such learning? Something greater than individual will or need. And you can interpret that as something that acts mercilessly and without prejudice. And you could say that's a god, and you could say that that's truth. Truth does not care about who you are or where you're from. It's just is. And there's big T's and little t truths, but they all are acting mercilessly and without prejudice. But I think the thing of it, though, is that, you know, then the Count goes on the tangent of, well, if truth is going to just say that we're wrong anyway, then why bother? And Baudini's like, you're missing the point. The point is that you need knowledge to compound itself. The truth reveals itself when you dig deep enough. And when you push hard enough, then you break open the door and there's truth right in front of you. But if you don't build up to that point, you're not going to find it. I loved it. I would call it truth. Baudini's like, yep. And then he's like, here's the key to the archival vault. And he didn't want to give it up to Baudini. He didn't want to give it up, and I don't blame him. I like that Baudini's like, trying to figure it out. He's like, excuse me. I love that how different Baudini and Piast are, because Piast was so nervous taking that vault key. He's like, I don't know if I'm ready to have all this power and responsibility to carry on and perfect what you've spent your life doing. And there's thousands of years of archival. But he's like, give me that shit. Let me go. And he has the stuff from Raffles. So yeah. How many years of life do you think this key represents? Aksha's like, is this a trick question? It's like, it's 2,000 years. If they don't lead to an answer, did truth ever need us at all? Which we know that that's just his hubris talking. So yeah, he gives him the key and then he goes back. Now, Baudini in this moment says, I like the Baudini, he's like, this will be sufficient. We've got lots of things in this vault. He's like, Akshay, grab the luggage, take it back. I feel it's like Adam Family Values, and Akshay is Uncle Fester, and Baudini is Debbie. She's like, grab the luggage. Which Bodini and Debbie, both having diva energy, carry these back to the village. We don't work here, so we don't need to attract. Also, I feel like Bodini doesn't want to attract the attention of the organization because the organization doesn't exactly agree with Count Piast, and Bodini doesn't want to share the credit with any of these guys. Colby ain't stealing his tree of teas anytime soon. Now, Yolenta, he says, as for you, Yolenta, I'll leave the choice to you, but I'd prefer it if your involvement ended here. I'd like to work alone. And she's like, very well. She says, I don't think I'd have much to offer at this point. And I'm like, girl, you might though. Now he said he gave her the choice. So the question is, will she at one point go to help him? Or, will Colby ask for another treatise of hers? Or will she want to go help him? I would love it if she taught Aksha how to read and write. Because after explaining that they're miracles, Aksha was just like, oh, that's cool. I wish I knew how to read and write. I was like, that was basically she goes on about how amazing it is. And Aksha's like, I was asking you because I don't know how to. So that's cool. Neato. I want her to be able to teach him now. He needs to know. Plus, he really needs to know if he's going to help out Bodini. He's like, you've been a great help. So he's like, I rarely say anything like this. But, if you have any requests, I'd like to repay you if I can. And she says, in that case, perfect the heliocentric model. Yep. And he's like, oh, I promise. I love it. And then he says one more thing. If we happen to be arrested in the future, I thought he was going to say, we're going to turn you in as a witch. But he did say, just don't say anything. Look at Bodini. Look at him soften up a little bit. Good for him. So on the one hand, I think it's good that she's not involved right now because if they are caught, that would be bad and her dad would be very pissed. But I think she's going to still end up being involved. The question is just how at this point. And so then he asks about what does it feel like to be able to read? He didn't even say right. He's like, until recently, the only person I knew that could read was my mentor in the guild. And I like that she's like, I like that it was a scandal to say that reading and writing are miracles. I can't believe that's a scandal to say that. But she's like, I'm not saying that they're like miracles, done by her savior. But she's like, they're not the same, but they're still miracles. I love it. And the way she describes it, I'm like, this is why I'm like, you all need to read and write. You need to like take ChatGPT and all the AI and just like, fuck it. Just throw it away. You don't need it. You don't need it. And that's like, even the idea, the process of writing, because a lot of students are like, writing a draft. I don't want to do that. And I'm like, yes, you need to write. I have to tell students that I coach, I'm like, you are going to mess up. You are going to do poorly the first time. We call it crusty dusty. You're going to have a crusty dusty time when you start out writing, but you have to fail at something to get better. You just have to. Even if it's not a big fail, even if it's a tiny fail, even if you misspell a word, you're not going to know any better until you mess up and then you realize what you did wrong and you fix it. But the problem is, if I get on my soapbox again, with AI and stuff, there is no fixing. It does it for you, so then you don't have to think, so then you're dumb, and then people can easily manipulate you. Why would you do that to yourself? That's stupid. So I'm like, and I know it's convenient, and convenience is a temptation. It is so temptuous to be like how easy this would be. It's so tempting. It's so tempting. When I go in the comments section on these videos, there are AI prompts where it is so tempting for me just to like click that AI prompt and let it reply for the comments for me. But then what's the point? If I'm not going to answer the comments myself, what's the point? That's not me then. So and then you don't get to read any comments and learn things. And this story in this episode makes you think about that. By saying, like, by reading, you get to interact with conversations from this scene with Yolenta talking about you get to laugh at rumors from 1,000 years ago. You get to laugh at what the old things were and how it's changed and be like, wow, look at what we thought back then. Like you watch Back to the Future Part 2 and you're like, oh, that's 2015. And you just see what it is now and you're like, oh, that's it. But that idea of when she said you can have a conversation with someone from 200 years ago. You can time travel through reading. The moment I was like watching this in the episode, I want to go grab a rhetoric book and like read Aristotle again. Like that's what it just, because I think it's so cool to see what these people from 2000 plus years ago thought and how we still apply it in our everyday lives. Like that's why rhetoric is so fascinating to me, because it's how we apply ourselves. People are like, I have students all the time. They're like, why do I need to take a philosophy class? I'm like, you kind of need to learn how these people thought, because we still think it the same way today, right? It's just in different ways and in different modes. It's crazy. Like, I love it. I absolutely love it. So yeah, why not? In this day and age. But when I read, and honestly, it is a way to escape. In this day and age, the great figures from the past engage with me in conversation, and I can escape the present when it's its worst. I mean, that's really a lot of times media stories, they are escape. When you're sad, you can read something that makes you happy again. And it makes me emotional. Like I could cry. And just seeing Akshi's face where he's just amazed by that. It makes me want to cry. It's so beautiful. He's like, it's that Grace. And she's like, yes, it is. She looks like Dakota Fanning in that moment where she's like, yes, it is. On my channel, I reacted to Uptown Girls, which is a movie that has a very, very young Dakota Fanning in it. She would make a great Yolenta. I just realized that. She'd be perfect for Yolenta. She's got blue eyes, but you can put contacts in. Yeah. I just want Akshay to learn how to read. I need him to learn how to read, at least. Even if he can't write, I need this poor boy to be able to escape the harshness of reality. So then Piast has his death. Now, the big question is, what are they going to do about that book? Because he dropped the book. The book fell into the bushes. It sounded like it fell into the bushes. It didn't sound like a plop, like it fell into a fountain or something. So it's fell into the bushes. So the question is Bodini or Yolenta? I would imagine Yolenta would get her hands on the book, but then it's like, what's she going to do with it? And is she going to get blamed for stealing the book, even if she finds it in the bushes because she's a woman? I don't know. But somebody's going to have to find that book at some point, and they have the key now. Honestly, though, I would not want to die like coughing my lungs out. I don't think I'd want to do that. At least he gets to see the sky and the stars, and the night sky is gorgeous. And that part where he reaches his hand up and says the truth. So good. So good. And yeah, and then the next day. And that's where the episode ends, so we don't know. This series gives me hope. It really does. Because there are some dark and scary things afoot right now in our world, especially in my neck of the woods. And I need to watch a series like this to help me not only identify with like-mindedness, because this series brings up some things that I consistently agree with, but also to let me know that there are others that, again, it's the idea of faith and finding connection and people that believe in the same things that you do. And that gives you hope that you're not alone in those thoughts. Now, echo chambers are bad. You don't want to get involved in an echo chamber where everybody says the same thing, because then you don't learn, then you don't grow, and then it's just flatline. But it is good to find people that challenge you while also being of the same mindset about things as a whole. And so this series definitely makes me feel better knowing that. So yeah. Anyway, I am excited to hear your thoughts down below. As you know, each week this series is amazing, but I'm so excited. Next week we're on episode 10. We're not even halfway through this series. Isn't that exciting? Isn't that exciting? I'm so happy this series has like 24, 25 episodes. So excited. It makes you feel good. I don't know how long we're following these crew, but, hopefully at least till the halfway point. But we'll see. So I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe. Take care. And yeah, I'll be back very soon with more of ORB on the movements of the earth. Bye.